Okay, welcome back to the Compassionate Cultures podcast. It has been a minute or two, three or four. Again, as always, I've been busy. I try and fit recording these podcast episodes in between all the work that we're doing. But again, the period became very congested. So I always say, forgive me. The intention is always there. But I can tell you, I've done quite a few interviews recently for this podcast and for others. So look out for those. Got some really good stuff coming up. But for this episode, I want to talk about my visit to go and see historian David Olusoga on stage. So he is well known for uncovering hidden histories, hidden diverse histories. And so I'd already had this book. If you're listening, it's the Black and British, a Forgotten History book. And, you know, I started to read it, but by no means have I completed this 59 pages long book because it's hard going. No, sorry, more like 600 pages. It's hard going, particularly as someone who's racialized as Black. Some of this history is really tough, but interesting and essential to really understand the truth. And on the night, I also purchased this book, which my daughter and I have been enjoying, which is the Black History for Every Day of the Year. I love it because, as it says, you can simply just open it up and read a page. Today's what? The day of recording is the 20th of May. I won't read the whole thing, but to tell you that today is about Toussaint Louverture, who was born enslaved in the French colony of Saint Domingue on the 20th of May 1743. So what's lovely is that every day you can learn something about Black history. Love the book there because it's nice and concise, and you can definitely fit in reading a page because each one's a page long every day. So what an interesting visit. So I've made some notes and I'm literally going to go through my notes so that you can benefit from this amazing event that was sold out, that I went with my wonderful friend Iris, who introduced, not this year, yeah, she did introduce David Olusoga to me because many years ago I didn't know who he was, and she's a complete fan. And so when I heard that it was coming up, I knew we had to go. So he started out by talking about how he'd been told by the police to walk around with bodyguards for a couple of years after having produced a particular show around uncovering, again, diverse histories. And because people didn't like the truth, they, obviously sent him death threats and other sorts of threats to the point where he needed bodyguards. And that it immediately got me sat up in my seat because I think about the type of work that I do. And as much as we don't go into great detail about history, we obviously talk about the truth and where racially marginalised people are in this current day and where that's come from. So we do dabble a little bit into history, and that does upset people. It does make people feel defensive, guilty, angry. And it just reminds somebody. I remember somebody saying to me, like, you're doing light work, and I didn't think much of it when they said it. But I thought that of David Olusoga when I thought about him doing this work to educate us, to make sure that we know the truth far beyond what we've been taught in schools. And he's almost like correcting the wrongs. And I for the first time, I saw myself in a similar light, not the same light as David, but in that I'm helping people to see how the world is in a bid to try and make it more fair. And it is light work, but it's also dangerous work, and that stuck with me. He spoke about the word blighty, which I hadn't really come across, but it's a word that many in the far right have kind of adopted to mean. The online dictionary defines it as an informal term for Britain or England used by soldiers in the First and Second World Wars. So nowadays, a lot of far right groups are reclaiming the word. However, I don't know how many of them know. It's a Hindi word, which means foreign or abroad. And so what David was saying was that it was most likely used by soldiers, Indian soldiers, some of the 90,000 soldiers in the First World War. It was used by them. Not most likely, sorry, it was used by them. And this is back to, I looked this up. I saw the etymology of the word on Wikipedia, which states the word ultimately derives from the Persian word vileti. I could be saying that wrong. From a regional Hindustani language, with the use of B replacing V, meaning foreign, which more specifically came to mean European or British English during the time of the British Raj. So again, there's some hidden history there, which, you know, we don't know about these things until we're taught. We don't know. So then that got him talking about lots of things that are borrowed from other cultures, and the origin is often forgotten. And so I'm going to just start by saying, so when you hear about people talking about cultural appropriation, this is what we're often scared of, because we know the history. We know that often many practices, many looks, many words, they're taken from other cultures, they're adopted by westernized cultures, and then the origin is forgotten. And we so desperately want to have a desire to, an innate desire to hang on to our cultures and our histories. And so that's why people get so upset. So people aren't so much upset about people enjoying the culture. It's more about it being lost, the original culture being lost. So he then spoke about food. And he recalled that in 2011, chicken tikka masala became Britain's most popular dish. I remember this. And he said, as if fish and chips was innately British, which I knew wasn't. But again, you know, you don't often think about that, because so often we hear about fish and chips being a British thing. But potatoes come from Colombia. They were brought over from Colombia, which I'm going to come to that in a second. Actually, I'll come back to that in a second. I'll come back to fish and chips. He started talking about the second most popular tea is called Yorkshire tea. So again, we have this idea of tea being very British, and you know, we have Yorkshire tea. But think about it, tea doesn't grow in the UK. No, it can't grow here because it grows in subtropical climates, or tropical climates such as China, Myanmar, Nepal, India. And you know, he spoke about us drinking out of bone china, which is from China. Side note, by the way, like, I was yesterday years old when I found out that bone china actually comes from real bone. Yeah, it comes from bone, the bone ash from cows, and that's what gives the bone china the translucent, white, really strong form that it has. Did you know? Because I didn't. So yeah, that's where tea comes from, not England, but yet still often it's made out to be very British. And we just need to be honest about that history. It's okay that it's not British. Like, why do we have to claim it? Like, it's nice. There's many things that are nice, but are not ours. And he said we have a deep, uncomfortable history of trade and commerce. And he mentioned Walter Riley's and the potatoes. He's very well known for bringing potatoes to the UK, but they were brought from Colombia. Okay, so they weren't, again, not British. They've been here for a long time, since the 16th century, but they're not, again, from Britain or the UK. And then the fried fish comes from Jewish refugees in Spain and Portugal, not from the UK. They brought it over to the UK, but it's not native to here. We didn't create it. The British or English did not create it. Okay. Then he says there's often, again, continuing on this theme of hiding the origins of something, or kind of, what's the word? kind of putting smoke and mirrors up to kind of disguise where something comes from, or to hide a deep troubled history. He said in Bristol, where he's from, there are lots of blue plaques on the wall which signify a historical moment or fact. So he goes, you'll see plaques on the wall which will say West Indian planter, which really is a euphemism for slave owner. Also, there's another one, West Indian merchant, which, I've missed it. Where did I write this? Yeah, slave owner. They both mean slave owner. So you own slaves. And this is to make this idea of the history being more palatable. So it got me thinking about me listening to the news recently, and Keir Starmer is having talks, and others having talks with the EU about having this balanced youth experience. And I remember one commentator saying something like, well, it's not being called, live and work abroad anymore for students to kind of not attract lots of EU students to come to the UK. So again, there's this practice within England particularly of changing words to change the meaning, to kind of veer you off course so you're not thinking about something else. We need to pay attention to that. Then he also spoke about the liberation of Paris during the Second World War by 100,000 men from North Africa, and that when we see the heroes of that particular moment of freeing Paris from German invasion, the names and identities and the presence of those Black African men have been eliminated, erased. It's only now that you can go online and do a bit of Googling and find that out. But generally, when we're taught these things in schools, we're not taught about that Black African presence. And there's loads of examples like that. So also moving on, because I'm, again, always not trying to make these episodes too long. So David says that people often accuse him of trying to make white people feel guilty by sharing his history. And what I loved about what he said is it's not about guilt, it's about honesty. Shouldn't it always be about honesty? We have to contend as Black people with very difficult histories based on what's happened to us. And none of us, and there were people who were not pleasant also, who were also Black. We have to contend with that. We all have to contend with difficult histories. However, what's happened in this racialized society is that the feelings of white people are often prioritized. So I always ask that question when there's a debate about sharing something that might be difficult or having a difficult conversation. Think about whose feelings are being prioritized. Okay, in wanting to be fair, whose feelings are being prioritized. Okay, what else happened? When asked about the phrase that Black people are always being victims, he said something really useful, which I will use. He goes, we wouldn't dream of telling British soldiers that they were victims of war. And he said, he just kind of flipped it off and said, it's a lazy trope, which I totally agree with. A couple of people he alerted me to. Hezekiah I don't know if it's pronounced Moscow or Moscow, but he was a Jamaican expat, I'm going to call him an expat, who came over to Britain in the late 1800s he wanted to be a lion tamer, but then ended up being a boxer. So David Olusoga and Stephen Knight, a BAFTA winning director, Stephen Knight, I didn't know him, sorry. They created the series 1,000 Blows. I'm going to look out for that, which tells the story of Hezekiah in Victorian England and also the struggles that he faced. So I wanted to ask him a question. I wanted to, after I heard that story about him having to walk around with bodyguards, I wanted to know, how does he take care of himself? And I suppose I wanted more from him, but I actually, upon reflection, I really hear what he's saying. Because I was thinking about myself, the other trainers at Strawberry Words, and what could we learn from him in terms of looking after ourselves. And he goes, it's this, being here, being around people that get it, being around, I guess he was really referring to them as normal people who want to make change. And the audience was very, very diverse. If anything, I'd say there were more white people than any other socially constructed race. And everybody was there to hear him and to learn from him. And actually, there is something I can take from that. Absolutely. In that, isn't it great to be in environments where people get it? And so I will take that, in that it's important, doing this work, that we are around people and we talk about this. So it's just reflecting back to me some of the stuff that we talk about. The 6 R's of anti-racism by the scholar Tema Jean Ucken talks about relationships, building relationships with people either like you or people who get it, who are educated in wanting to create a fairer world, and these systems of discrimination and racism. And so it just makes complete sense. And so it's often we know these things but don't necessarily practice them. And I think I need to do more of that. That's what I took away from that. What do I want to leave you with? Because I'm going to leave you with something now. He feels very encouraged by many teachers and lecturers in schools, even though the curriculum's not changing necessarily to reflect on his history. He knows that there's a lot more flexibility, particularly in academies. And he's seen teachers who are determined to, who look out at their studentship and they see the diverse range of pupils that they have, and they just can't tell them this kind of whitewashed version of history. And so they are very honest, which is great. It's great to see that he's seeing that, and that in that area change is being made. That's it, really. Also, in response to being seen as the angry black guy, he says that he doesn't have the luxury of being angry, but that he delivers his work in a light way and sometimes with humor. And I totally understand that. That's how I have to take on board, how I have to deliver sessions. I guess that, we come from a place of compassion, and even though he didn't say it, I think he does too. I just get the feeling that he just wants everybody to see the truth and ultimately get along, which, makes complete sense. I get it. So that was my trip to go to see David Olusoga. I am enlightened as a result. He said he's back in Birmingham on the 5th of November. He's bringing machine guns. It's a history thing, right? But yeah, I most likely will be back for that. So hopefully that's been useful to you also. I strongly recommend buying one of his many books if you want to learn this history. But again, if you're racialized as black, because he does talk a lot about black people, just take it maybe a page at a time, some of the more difficult ones. But certainly I'd recommend getting this one, the Black History for every day of the year, because it keeps us educated in nice, easy daily chunks. All right, I'll speak to you soon. Bye.